Diana Bletter is an author who lives in the north of Israel. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Huffington Post. Her latest novel, A Remarkable Kindness, was published late last year, and I'm very happy to have her here in the studio to tell us all about it. Thanks for coming in, Diana.
Thank you, Oded. I'm happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit about this book, A Remarkable Kindness.
It's a novel about 4 American women who all moved to Israel for various reasons, and they're members of a Chevra Kadisha, a burial society, in a village similar to the village where I live in Shevet Zion.
Okay, so an American woman moved to Israel, lives in the north of Israel. It sounds similar to someone who just might be here.
That's correct. I'm a member also of the Chevra Kadisha. I translate it as a burial circle, even though it's literally translated as a burial society or a holy society because it closes the circle of life. And in our village, the Chevra Kadisha is all voluntary, and we perform this as a loving act of kindness because it's considered the greatest mitzvah or the greatest deed that you can do for somebody because a dead person can never thank you.
It is a very interesting backdrop for any story, I would imagine. How you ended up doing it? How long have you been doing this?
I've been doing it for about 15 years. When I moved to this village in Shevet Zion, not many people want to do this ritual, and I took it on because I thought it would be a very beautiful ritual and a way to honor women from the village who I know. They're my neighbors and friends.
Right. It's it does sound like a very special thing that you put yourself through. Now you live in Israel, but you write in English. How does that work? Do you see yourself as something of an outsider here? Well,
I'm certainly an American, and when you hear me, when I speak in Hebrew, everybody knows I'm an outsider. But I feel very much a part of this country, and I'm very proud to be an Israeli American or an American Israeli.
And what's it like being an American Israeli or an Israeli American?
Well, I still think that I'm a wandering Jew, and even though I'm in Israel, I still see the world through Jewish eyes, not necessarily through American eyes or Israeli eyes, but my own special perspective.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit before the show, and I read up, preparing for this interview, and I saw that you did move around a little bit. You lived in many places. What was it about northern Israel that you decided to settle down there?
Well, I love the sea. I love living by the sea. And when I lived in Rome, actually I worked as a freelance journalist there, and I met a journalist from Israel, Noah Klieger, who writes for Yediot, and we were both covering a story about Russian Jews who were not going to Israel but going to other places. And Noah was very upset about that. And I said to him, one day I'm going to get to Israel. And that was in 1980. It took me another 11 years, but I managed to get here.
Right. And you moved from being a journalist to writing novels as well, right?
I still do journalism.
Oh, okay. Now, you published books before that. One of them is a very interesting looking book, a memoir of yours titled
The Mom Who Took Off on Her Motorcycle. And it's a story of my husband on his motorcycle, and I went on my motorcycle, and we left from New York and traveled all the way up to Alaska.
Wow.
And back again on 2 motorcycles and lived to tell the tale.
Wow, what's the distance there?
It was 15,000 kilometers.
Wow. And what brought that on?
Well, my husband Johnny and I have 6 children together, and the youngest was leaving the house, and we were faced with an empty nest, and I thought I wanted to do something special. So I got an assignment from the New York Times to write about a glacier up there, and I said, well, let's just ride our motorcycles up there.
That is very cool, I have to say. I wish I could do it at some point. Now, another interesting fact is that book was self-published.
Correct.
And this book, A Remarkable Kindness, was published at a small publishing house called HarperCollins. So how did that happen?
Well, I wanted to publish the mom who took off on a motorcycle with a big publisher, but people said that nobody wanted to read about a Jewish mother taking off on a motorcycle.
But they want to read about 4 Jewish women working for Chevra Kadisha in northern Israel?
I guess so. I guess it appealed to them. I guess the idea that by working, being so close to death makes people appreciate being alive. And that's only what happened to me. Rather than something that would be morbid or would make me depressed, after every time I participate in this moving ritual, I think, I'm alive. It's so wonderful to be alive and standing up. And that's what
we should say this is not a depressing book.
Well, part of it is sad because it takes place. Part of it takes place during the 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah, and one of our sons was wounded in that war. So there is sadness, obviously, but it's I hope a joyful book and a remarkable kindness and an affirmation of life.
Exactly my thoughts. Now, you mentioned the 4 children that you have, right?
Well, I have 4, and my husband has 2 children, and we adopted unofficially.
There's a story in your home life as well.
Right. We heard about a young Ethiopian woman who kind of needed help, and so we sort of took her in unofficially, and she became the 7th child, and now she's happily living
6
in.
just isn't enough.
Right. Happily living in Rishon.
That's great. What's next for you?
I'm working on a novel that's set in the Lower East Side in New York in the early 1900s, which is where my grandparents had lived when they first moved to Israel to New York from Russia.
I often confuse the two also. Diana, it sounds super interesting. I'm looking forward to it. And once again, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much, Oded.